Yeah, so I worked in a inpatient drug rehab for about 3 years. The program is like indoor outdoor, so half of the week is spent out backpacking, and then the other half of the week is spent like in town doing like clinical stuff, meetings and therapy and all that kind of stuff. So I worked at this rehab in both of those capacities. I started there as an outdoor guide, and I worked as an outdoor guide for a little over a year. So I would take the guys out backpacking. We'd be gone for 3 or 4 days at a time. And it was one of those things where you're fully responsible for yourself. You got to bring your water and your treatment stuff to treat additional water. So you have drinking water. You got to bring all your food. You have to pack out everything you bring in, including your own waste products. You have to have all your clothes, tent, sleeping stuff. So, it's not like we're going for a cute walk, for a couple of miles. It's like a big deal. And especially it can be pretty physically taxing for people that have just come into treatment and, they're like fresh off of heroin and not feeling so hot. And then suddenly you stick a 40-pound pack on their back and say, all right, we're going for a 10-mile hike, let's go. I was introduced to starting strength originally in Flagstaff, Arizona by a guy named Steve. And Steve was in his 60s, he was 63 at the time. And one of the days that he was teaching me how to do the lifts, he was training as well, and I watched him squat 535. So, it got my attention. So, I'm a case study in this as well because I had some really bad habits in my teens and 20s that I'm really grateful to be free of now and continue to stay free of. But there's a lot of work that goes into, changing your life so that you stop making all the same terrible decisions. And it's very similar to the structure required and the intention and the programming required to change your physique or change your health. So in rehab setting, nobody comes to rehab feeling like a winner. So people are pretty broken down. They're pretty upset with the choices that they've made. They feel bad about themselves. They don't have a whole lot to hang their hat on or feel confident about. And training is one of these things that it's pretty simple. It's not easy, but it is simple, and it is something that people can follow, and then they can feel good about the progress that they've made, and it's measurable. Here at Starting Strength, we can measure how much weight we've added to our squat because we squat the same way every time we squat. So very much the same in rehab. Our demographic at this treatment center was males aged 18 to 30. So I essentially had a revolving door of young men with free time and a whole lot of energy because they just got off drugs and alcohol. And then they're staying off drugs and alcohol long term. The inpatient portion of the treatment was 6 months. So for guys that were interested in training, this is like the perfect scenario. So I had a bunch of unofficial clients for training, and going to the gym was a privilege. So the guys did what they had to do to ensure that we had gym privileges, and then I would take them and I'd work with them. And as someone who had overcome a lot of bad habits myself, I kind of represented this look guys, here's something you can work toward, like modeling what the program has done for me. And with the guys that, not everybody's gonna be interested. Some of the guys wanna go to the gym and sit in the hot tub the whole time. And though we discourage that, at the end of the day, you can't make somebody go to the gym and work hard. Just like you can't make somebody go to rehab and work hard. They can go in there and sit on their ass and do nothing, or they can make something of themselves. And that was the difference that I saw in a lot of guys that actually trained. They recognized they had a deficiency somewhere, and they asked for the tools to fix it, and then they applied them. And the recovery process from drug and alcohol addiction is quite similar. It's like, I'm messed up, I don't know what to do, I'm gonna ask somebody for help, they're gonna provide me with the tools to help myself, and then I'm gonna do that. And then also part of the recovery process is once you've gotten yourself out of the mud, you turn around and help other people. Yeah. So training provided this structure. It provided something that we're working toward every single week. So we've got all the other things, the clinical side of things, the number of days sober, that kind of stuff tallying up. But also for the guys that decided to work on their bodies through training, they've got another thing to be proud of, that they're doing week in, week out, putting in the work and noticing the results. Yeah. Okay. So specific examples of guys that use the program to their benefit. I'm still in touch with a lot of guys today, and I've been gone there for several years, and I'm still in touch with guys today that are still doing the program. They're still toeing the line with their sobriety. They're having success in their life where they've never had it before, and they're also working on their training. So I actually got a call the other day. A guy named Devin called me, and he's in Idaho Falls, and noticed on Facebook that I'm in Boise. Well, Devin is particularly interesting. He's a really good dude, but he was a pain in the ass when he got the treatment. The guy was The guy was resistant to everything. It was so hard to get him to comply. And most of the time, he just didn't comply. He was just like, "I'm going to be a jerk, and you can deal with it because you're getting paid to be here." It's that kind of deal. And you get that. You get that a lot. And oftentimes, predictably, those cases don't do that well. They get out and they get loaded, and whatever other bad things come along with that. Well, Devin became curious, and Devin was already a big guy. He'd been in the gym a lot, but like a lot of us, when we find starting strength, we're in the gym exercising, but not necessarily training. So I guess Devin had been there for probably like 2 months. Essentially, he had wasted 2 months, being a goofball. And we had a talk one day, and he's like, "Yeah, I think I want to start training." I was like, "Right on, brother, let's do it." So, before we can even begin training, Devin's got to make sure the house is clean. Devin's got to make sure the chores are done, and Devin's got to make sure he's got his butt in the van on time to go to the gym, right? Because it's a privilege, it's not a given. Devin was always one of those ones dragging his heels, still in his pajamas, when everybody else is ready to go to the gym. And then Devin turned into the guy out in the van honking the horn, telling people to hurry up. So it's like a huge change. And obviously, success in getting your life together and sobriety and things like that, training isn't going to make you sober. But some of the fundamentals that are involved in training are foundational to the rest of your life as well. So Devin made a plan, Devin got help, and Devin stuck to it. So Devin calls me the other day, and man, he started out squatting probably in the mid 100s, and he had well over 3 plates on the bar by the time he got out of treatment. And I don't know where he's been at since then. Devin went and put himself through crane school. So he's been all over the country operating cranes and doing great. And I mean, you got to keep in mind, this is a guy that, before he got the treatment, he's like laying on his mom's couch smoking heroin, and then suddenly he's out operating cranes and making a life for himself, paying all of his bills, and making pretty good money, as I understand it. But yeah, Devin called me, he said, "Dude, I'm in Idaho Falls. What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm out in Boise, man. I'm actually getting more involved with starting strength." And he was stoked to hear that. And he said, over the last few months, because they've had him moving around so much, he hasn't had access to a gym. And he's really noticed his quality of life is slipping. So he's still doing good in lots of different aspects of life, but he's smart enough to be aware that, hey, this thing's slipping away from me, and I don't like what's happening as a result. So Devin and I talked, and we figured out he should just buy his own equipment and stick it in the bed of his truck because he drives everywhere. So boom, that problem's solved. But he's going to come to Boise on Sunday, and we're gonna go through the lifts again. And he's asked me to coach him because he knows smartly that if he puts this back in his life, then everything else flourishes too. Yeah, great. Okay, so just like a brief history of Nick here. I grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina. It's a coastal city. I got involved in surfing when I was fairly young, and skateboarding and all that stuff. But I was a really fat little kid, and I was fat into my teens. And my dad was a Domino's franchisee, so what was on the menu? Pizza. I'd sit there and eat a whole pizza. I still will sit there and eat a whole pizza to myself, but it's a little different now. But yeah, I was like really heavy set as a kid, and I was really self-conscious about it. And that followed me for a really long time. Honestly, it followed me until I found starting strength. But I remember a little anecdote. Me and my brother Jared and our neighbor Mark, and Mark is a really good surfer, and I looked up to him a lot. He's like 5 years older than me. We're all out in front of our house skateboarding. And Mark goes, "Hey, Nicholas, you've got something on your chin." And I go, huh? And he goes, no, not that one, that one. So I had to laugh. I had to act like it was funny, you know, even though obviously it like really hurt my feelings. But it was that kind of stuff, man. It stuck with me for a long time. So that translates into doing a lot of goofy stuff to try and be skinny, you know, including pep pills or drugs that make you lose your appetite, you know, that kind of stuff. And I did everything that I could to try and mitigate my weight. I was always trying to become less of myself instead of like grow into a better person, which I think is one of the biggest differences between starting strength and typical personal training. You know, it's always like tone up, lose 10 pounds or whatever. And starting strength's like, no, go eat, get big, get strong. Doesn't matter if you're man or woman. So I got introduced to drugs when I was young, in my teens, early teens. I got hooked up on a lot of bad stuff, you know, not the coolest thing I ever did. I was an IV heroin user for almost 10 years. So I had a lot of stuff that I had put in my life that was going against me, and I had a long way to go to fix those problems. And starting strength was a big part of that. So let's see, you know, growing up in Wilmington and surfing and all that, all I ever wanted was to look like the surfers. You know, I was like a 90s kid, and the look was like, you know, skinny with some abs and long hair, and I have curly hair, and I'm not skinny, and I don't have abs, and it was terrible. It was awful, you know. So that carried well into my 20s, and I found starting strength when I was 26, and by the guy who introduced me to it. And from that moment on, well, let me say this first. What Steve said to me was, Nick, you're never gonna be a skinny little hipster. You're built like a man. Why don't you start lifting like one? And I was like, well, okay, you know, you got my attention with that 535 squat, so we're doing it. So for the first time in my life, I went from chasing this like 0 calorie day every single day, you know, through exercise and diet and all sorts of stuff. I was always an active person. I love surfing, I love playing sports and all that, but the quest for leanness took the fun out of a lot of it, you know, because instead of, oh, I got to play a game of volleyball today, or I got to go surfing today, it was like, I have to do something today or else I'm gonna get fat, you know. And starting strength is, you know, completely flips that paradigm on its head. So when I first began lifting, I was 26 years old when I first really began actually training, because until then I'm just in there riding the machines, you know, working up a sweat. My squat was, well, let me say this first. I didn't do any of the barbell lifts because, as everyone knows, if you lift heavy, you're gonna get bulky, not lean, right? So that's a given. And as everyone knows, you know, 99% of the time when you lift heavy, you get injured. So it's just a fool's errand, you know? So I didn't deadlift because it is bad for your back. I didn't press because you're supposed to do that sitting down with dumbbells. I would bench, of course, every guy benches, you know, it's like chest day 8 days a week, but my grip was way too wide, my range of motion was trash. I was only doing it so that I could feel, you know, the pump, you know, and nothing else, and continuing to wonder why I could only bench a plate. And squatting, I tried a couple of times, but you know, I could do almost 800 pounds on the leg press. Why would I bother squatting? I'm so strong. So when Steve first coached me, my squat was about 145. We started about 145, which I could successfully do for 3 sets of 5 reps to depth. My press was around 95 pounds. My bench, like I said, was about a plate with lousy range of motion. And my deadlift, I think on my first session, was like 165. And I'm still really terrible at power cleans. You know, I'm just, I'm athletic in some senses, but sometimes I'm not as coordinated as I like to be. Today I pressed 3 doubles for 230. Last week I benched 3 sets of 5 at 320. This week I'm programmed to deadlift 5 sets of 3 at 495 and squat 5 sets of 5 at 425. So we've made some progress in the 6 years that I've been at it. And you know, that's all well and good. I love being strong. I really enjoy it. But the big win for me there is I no longer live this life of like, oh my God, how am I going to get skinny? How am I going to get lean? Now, day in and day out, the only thing I have to worry about with food is making sure I don't get hungry. and I can eat however I like and I still stay lean. I'm like trying to put on weight right now and having a hard time. Getting over 200 pounds at 5'6" is tough. So, but it's something that I'm continually working toward. And starting strength for me and training and working toward a goal for me, put something in my life that I can be consistently proud of. Something that I can always take pride in, even if I have a bad day and I screw some stuff up. It's like, yeah, man, but you still trained and you still put more weight on the bar. Yeah, okay, so my current plan and then long-term goals. Before the whole COVID dealio, I had a thriving barbell business in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Again, this is not something I ever would have been able to do without starting strength. It gave me a model through which I could coach, and I'm really grateful for it. But I had 16 consistent clients 3 days a week, and then some that would come and go. And primarily my demographic was women in their 70s. That was most of my clients. And whenever we'd do the consultation, they'd always say the same thing. I don't want to look like you. That's what they always said. And I was like, well, that's fine, And then the men would always say, I just want to get lean. Both groups of people failing to realize that this isn't about looks. This is about function. It's about ability. And it's for the older folks, they go from worried about whether or not they can get out of bed in the morning to pulling 100+ pound deadlifts and taking their little dogs on walks. There was a gal that I had, she could no longer squat down low enough to leash up her little dog. And after about a week, that was no problem. And after a few weeks, she was taking the little dog on several mile hikes every day if she wanted. So I love that kind of work. I love coaching. I'm really blessed to be able to do it adequately, and I plan to make a career out of it, I guess resume my career that I had made out of it. And starting strength is the model that I believe in the community that I want to reside in. So long term, I plan to be a franchisee. I plan to have multiple gyms, but I also plan to find a way to bring starting strength into embattled populations. So like prisons and rehabs, boys' homes, things like that. I was working on a fire a couple of months ago, and there was a prison crew on the fire. Every now and then they get to have, every now and then guys in prison get to go, they do work release or whatever. Well, these guys were out on the fire. Really cool guys, really nice guys. And I talked to their CO, their correctional officer, and we set up that I was able to do a little seminar for them for a couple hours. I'm no rip, but I could do a couple things. So I got to take all these guys to the lifts. I got to tell them about programming. It turned out even one of them actually had the blue book, and he just hadn't read it yet because he was buried in, NASM nonsense. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but yeah. So these guys, again. One of the big important things about this in these populations specifically is that it gives these guys camaraderie. It gives them, and gals, of course, it gives people something to come together over. In prisons or in rehabs, what you get typically is what's called war stories. Everybody sits down and brags about how much Xanax they could take. And it's just the same old living in the past over and over again, and the same old story is rehashed. It's not changing the brain pathways any. The guys I noticed that were in the rehab I was working at, they had something new. These guys would sit down and talk about lifting, and they would help each other out, and they'd work on programming. So instead now, they've got something healthy and good that they're forward focused about instead of sitting around talking about doing dope. So really, really long term, I would love to be able to bring starting strength to people that maybe can't come to starting strength at that time in their lives. They're inpatient somewhere, in prison somewhere. Because just like with me, it gives you like a rope out of the hole. It changed my life, and I think saved my life in a lot of ways. And I'm really blessed and really grateful. I'd just like to say one more thing about starting strength. Sorry that this has kind of become like an infomercial for it, but I was in the sauna the other day at the gym, and a guy asked me in there if I'd ever been a personal trainer. And I corrected him and said, no, I was a barbell strength coach for a while though, and I'm working to develop a client base again out here. And he said, okay, yeah, I just want to get my certification and make some money. And I said, okay, you should go over to Starting Strength Boise and talk to these guys. They're not going to ask you for money. you should go over there and look at the book and learn from them, because they're really, really intelligent and they really know their stuff. And he said, no thanks, I want to make money, not spend money. And I think that pretty much sums it up, you know. That's the difference between that hustle and starting strength. You know, starting strength, what's the exam pass rate, like 12 or 15% or something, you know? It's not real good. It's a tough exam, and for good reason, because this is tough stuff and you need good coaches. So I take so much pride in being associated with starting strength, because you guys aren't interested in watering down your product. You know, if people can't coach to starting strength standards, then they're not a starting strength coach, period.